Greetings world. We are anonymous.
My name is Wanda, and this is my story about domestic violence. At the age of 18, I had my whole life planned out. I wanted to be a history teacher at 25, get married at 28 and have 2 kids, boy and girl. Nevertheless, life turned out differently because I was carried away with the thoughts of being independent. I wanted to break away from the turmoils of living in a step-family. I met a young man at the age of 22, he was the prince in shining armor. Unfortunately, I never knew that shiny things could hurt. I learned that the hard way after we got married. On this fateful day, I woke up to the usual routine. Getting out of bed was always tough because once my feet touch the cold tiled floor, life resumes. I was jolted out of bed by the melodious cry of my firstborn Terry. Terry was born on the 2nd of May 2000, on that day the clouds were smiling while Rob drove me to the hospital. I went in to complain about a slight discharge, nothing serious. Well, to my surprise the doctor felt it was time for Terry to meet the world. Little Terry was so shy of meeting new voices that he stayed 5 weeks after the expected date of delivery. I didn't mind having him kick gently for those extra weeks because he was a good sport. For once in my life, there was someone that loved me before seeing my face. So he could stay as much as was healthy for him. Hearing the doctor say it was time to get Terry out broke my heart, but I also got excited to meet this little guy. The nurses beckoned me to follow her to the ward. As the nurse put the line for a drip through my veins, my heart from racing, I was scared. For the first time after 5 years of losing Mum, I wished she were here. Well, Mum wasn't here, so I had to do this on my own. The nurse told me to lie down and call her whenever I felt a contraction. On the 12th call, the doctor came along and checked how much I had dilated. He told me we would go to the theater to have the baby. Entering the operating theater reminded me of horror movie rooms where the serial killer keeps his tools. There were tools of different shapes and sizes, and some even looked unimaginable. I lay on the bed and instructions followed. Push, breathe, push a little more. Yes, good job, Wanda. After a little silence, I heard a squeak. Terry didn't cry, so the doctor had to spank him so hard. 15 seconds later, Terry gave a short, tired cry. That was the most concise cry he ever had. Terry's cry that woke me up sounded like 12 angels singing an incoherent verse. The cry was a reminder to begin the daily life of bathing Terry, cooking, cleaning the floor and laundry. Although that day was a little different, I was going to the tailor for measurement. Before leaving for the tailor, I told my cousin to take care of Terry. I missed my appointment at the tailor's, so I had to wait about an hour. The tailor finally arrived and apologized for making me wait. She rushed the measurement. I rushed home. Getting home, I peeped into Terry's bed and saw him sleeping peacefully. What a relief. 3 hours later, Rob returned from work. He seemed calm, but was mad because I went out for so long. I was about to speak when a wave of air swept through my cheek. At first, it didn't seem like anything, until I saw his palm still hanging in the air. That was when it dawned on me that it was a slap. He shoved me after mumbling some words. I do not know if he was mumbling, or my hearing was impaired because his words were so faint. That was the beginning of intermittent years of domestic violence. I refer to the other acts of domestic violence as intermittently because it was not an everyday event like some women experience. The timing, however, did not make it any better. At this point, I would skip to the days of violence that I recall. 5 months after the first incident, I went through another ordeal. The day started like every other. Rob goes to work while I am home with Terry. After Rob returned from work, I went to the kitchen to prepare dinner. On my way to the living room, I could hear Rob speaking on the phone with a low tone. I walked into the living room and asked, "Who are you talking to?" He didn't answer. I was furious because it was obvious that the person on the other line was a female. I angrily kicked the CPU on the floor while walking away. Rob was mad. He followed me into the room and asked why I walked out angrily. I didn't answer. He approached me, held the collar of my shirt and shoved me to the floor. I told him to stop, but he picked up the keyboard on the computer desk and hit my head. I was confused. I could not react because as religion says you should respect your husband in all things. I got up and staggered to the corridor to find an escape. Rob followed me with a knife and shouted, "You want to stab me? Here, stab me." I ran out of the gate and stayed outside until he seemed calm. That day the tree I sat under was a divine shield because it kept the world from seeing my aching pains. I was heartbroken. How could the man I claimed to love beat me severely? How could the father of my child harm me so heartlessly? My questions fell on the winds, which answered with hissing sounds. Days later Rob called me and apologized for the beating. It wouldn't happen again, he promised. Those words had grown stale because they were repeated after every beating. That day I caused him and the girl he was talking to on the phone. I thought that placing a cause on them was an act of revenge. Well, to my dismay it was a waste of time. The lady in question is doing well as my so-called cause had no impact. Well, as the years passed, the beating subsided and turned into degrading, embarrassing insults. The insults were better because they didn't give me a swollen eye, broken lip, aching ribs and splitting headache. Unfortunately, I didn't know that the insults were stealing my self-confidence on a daily basis. 6 years later, we had an anniversary of domestic violence. At this time Terry had a sibling. The cutest little man, after Terry, I ever met. After the birth of Scott, I felt unattractive, so meeting a guy who was interested in me was exciting. Raphael was 2 years younger than I was. We met at a party. He was the younger version of guys I was into at 18, notorious and carefree. We exchanged numbers without any ulterior motive because he knew I was married with kids. On Valentine's Day, I received a message from Raphael with the words "Be my Valentine." That was the beginning of an exchange of text messages between Raphael and I. We exchanged pleasantries every day and talked about daily activities until Raphael started including "I love you" at the end of his text messages. At first, I was reluctant, but eventually, I fell for it. We were two young adults living in a false air bubble. It was clear that nothing could transpire between us because our worlds were completely different. Nevertheless, Raphael and I enjoyed the dangerous game of showering illicit attention on each other. One fateful morning, when the sky was black, and the wind stood still, Rob popped the air bubble. Rob was angry after seeing the text messages. He accused me of cheating, to which I admitted and explained that nothing had happened between Raphael and I. That however was not an excuse because I was exchanging "I love you" with another man, which was cheating. Rob got angry and smashed my BlackBerry on the floor. He walked up to me and started punching, shoving and shouting at me. He called my older brother and complained about what I did. My brother asked to speak with me. While we were talking, Rob pulled me off the bed and started punching me again. I did not cry or beg because somehow I felt that this beating was justified. At least it was the first time he ever beat me for something I did wrong. Minutes later he left me sitting on the broken wardrobe door. He took a shower and went out. That day was strange because I did not feel any pain. I walked into the bathroom to examine my wounds. As I stared into the mirror, my mind blocked the broken, shattered and weak reflection that stared back at me. In my mind, everything was perfect. Minutes later Scott ran to me and cuddled me. He asked, "Mummy, what happened to your eye?" I told him everything was fine. Scott knew it wasn't. I would stop my story at this point because the other incidents are similar to the ones narrated. Living with Rob has been a bittersweet experience. Rob can be the most endearing person on earth, but his anger knows no bounds. I decided to write this story to help people understand that domestic violence is a crisis that plagues families. Although men also suffer violence from abusive women, research shows that women are usually the recipients of violence in the home.